to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
I went to sleep on the couch last night because I couldn't sleep. So I went out to the couch and I was going to get up for jiu-jitsu this morning. And I did at 4:30. And at like 4:50, I was like, this is stupid. My body hurts. I'm tired. I know we're recording today. So I'm going to go back to bed. And then I crashed on the couch.
Dreamt of MacGyver?
Michelle and the boys got up. They came out and had breakfast. I'm on the couch next to the kitchen.
You don't hear them?
I didn't hear a thing. The boys are putting their plates in the sink, apparently, all this stuff. They're talking. They go into the bathroom, and Michelle comes and sits down next to me and like touches me. And I wake up, and she goes, I just had to make sure you were still alive. Because she goes, you were not moving. And I was like, I didn't hear a thing. I was finally out.
That's so funny.
I'm her 50-year-old baby. She's like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Are you still there?
Okay. Yeah. So I used to have dreams like
Awesome.
Yeah, I have awesome dreams almost every day. But I used to have dreams that someone was tapping me on the back, like just tapping me on the shoulder. And I would wake up kind of startled because, this is like back when I was single. This is all the way back in college, like somebody's tapping me on the shoulder. And I'd wake up and I'd jump around. And then when I first got married, I thought it was Michelle, like, or whatever. And so what's funny is the way I sleep, I have one arm like this. And so one of my arms, one of my hands,
yourself?
Yeah, one of my hands is on the back of my shoulder. And I've noticed it in the last year or so that when I'm starting to fall asleep, my fingers twitch and I tap myself.
You're pranking yourself. Who's it?
So I would tap myself awake and be like, who's there? And it's been me the whole time.
That's awesome.
It's a 50-year-long prank. One day I'll find who's sneaking in my room.
It took me until just like a year and a half ago to figure out that it was me the whole time. I thought, well, maybe it's a muscle twitch in my shoulder. Nope. It's literally tapping myself on the shoulder. Hey, buddy.
So funny.
Oh, we're not talking about
that, Ryan. What are we talking about, man?
Man, today we're going to talk about success, right? And all the S's are full of dollar signs.
Does it suck?
Yeah.
Success. And all the C's are S's too now, or something. Success. We're going to talk about success today. We're going to talk about worldly perspective of success, Christ-centered perspective of success, and how do we as Christians navigate those two fields in our lives?
But Ryan, you're saying I shouldn't try to be successful in real estate endeavors? I mean, I've slow flipped houses and I have a rental property.
Well, first of all, Pierce, you have very slow flipped houses.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think you're safe. No, I'm just kidding.
To be fair, you're faster than me on your new house.
That's true.
I
Yeah.
have a lot left to do, and you're getting pretty close.
Yeah. Well, no, look, man. I think that we're taught Waterloo, sponsored by Waterloo, dude. Like we've grown up so much. It used to be we would record 6 episodes in a day, which we can't do anymore, and you would knock out 6 Dr. Peppers.
Oh, that was a bad day. It was so bad.
By the last one, you'd crack it open and you'd have like a sip. You'd be like, no. But
I could drink 6 of these in no time.
yeah, dude, you put away the water. You do. If anybody out
Where's
there,
it go?
Yeah.
To the Waterloo.
Yeah.
We know between each episode, we know exactly where it goes. So, success is an interesting thing because I think our society kind of like builds ideas of success into us from the time we're really little, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even if I think grades, you have to have some sort of a system, I guess, to advance students from kindergarten to first grade or whatever. But even grades are teaching success and failure, right? You're learning success or failure if you make the team or you get cut from the team.
There's
like
a measure.
Yeah, there's a measure. I'll tell you this. I know that they don't allow people to play anymore, but I felt incredibly successful when I could break through the Red Rover line in 2nd grade.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Yeah, because if you couldn't break through and you got clotheslined, or you swung on their arms.
Embarrassing.
It's super embarrassing. And you knew you couldn't just pick the weakest spot because then everybody'd think you were weak, but you had to pick kind of a middle of the road
When you
spot
guys
that you
did
thought you
that,
could break through.
You would. I don't know if you guys are. For whatever reason, I always ended up being one of the ones picking the teams, which sucks because then everybody's pissed at you. But like, it's not being mean, but like you don't want girls on your team.
Not for that
Red
game.
Rover,
No.
because they're not going to do as well as the boys in them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Which is not good when you're picking the team and then you also like girls.
right.
It's difficult.
So you're successful in Red Rover, but not successful in romantic relationships.
You got to pick. Like, what's your measure?
16 years old, you call a girl like, I'd like to ask you out. No, forget it. You never asked me to be on
How
your Red
dare
Rover
you
team.
Remember
call me.
second grade?
Yeah.
But yeah, we measure success like from the time we're little kids, right? Like parents, or I think it's kind of like mean parents who criticize their 3-year-old for not coloring in the lines. But you know, like that first time, we just went to my mom's over spring break, and we went a few days later than we had planned on going, and so we missed my sister and her kids that were there. We were all going to be there at the same time, so we came in the day after them. And the boys, her kids, had colored some new pictures, and they were on the refrigerator. And one of the coloring pages that was on the refrigerator was mine. It was a coloring page, and it had my name on it. That
Wait, whose refrigerator? Your mom's?
My mom's.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, "What the heck is that?" And it was clearly something I've done in the last couple of years. There was shading on this cartoon dog and all this stuff. And she goes, Jesse found that in one of the coloring books.
Oh, like you were playing with the
nephew, and we had colored. You know, like we had colored together, I guess, a couple of years ago. And so they found it and they put it on the fridge with all the other kids' drawings.
Hi, I'm Wyan. Here's my drawing.
No, what I did is like, well, theirs suck. You know, look at mine has shading. I've added different value. I've layered the colors. You know, but we do that, right? We measure success in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And what's crazy is like one of my nephews loves Godzilla, so he's always drawing Godzilla, and I love it because I'm like, I would have done the exact same thing. Like, and his drawings remind me of my drawings as a kid, you know, and so we measure success in a lot of different ways. I painted a picture recently that has become one of my absolute favorites. It's of a couple of elk. And all of my elk paintings sell, and it didn't sell, so I felt like a failure.
That's so funny.
I've only had it for a few weeks, but it didn't sell like the day I posted it. So I was like, I failed. So the success and
I thought that, but I didn't think you would think
No, I mean, I knew it. I knew that you felt that way. You texted me, remember? You said you suck.
You suck art.
But what's interesting, right, is that even in Christian homes, our earliest kind of model for success is in things that don't connect to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Like how successful are you at coloring? How successful are you at counting? How successful are you at sports? How successful are you in your school? Like, and it doesn't really connect to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we grow up and we become adult men who, we all know men like this, whose value system, men in the church, I'm not talking about people who don't know Jesus, but men in the church, men who would profess to know Christ, whose value system of success is the house they have, the cars they drive, the job they have. And here's the thing, you can have a great house and you can have a really nice car and you can have a job where you're pulling down mid 6 figures or more or whatever and be successful from a worldly perspective. The problem is we're always kind of behind the 8 ball because now as adults, we're trying to learn what does it look like to have success as a follower of Christ.
Yes.
And how do we intermarry that? How do we bring that into the world that we're living in now? And
I think that's the hard part is because people
we weren't trained that way.
Right. People think about it from one perspective. Even
Their
like
whole lives.
Even like spiritually, it's like how successful are you spiritually? Like how well did you do in did you have a daily quiet time today?
Yep.
Did you do this today? Did you pray this? Like it's all these things that the same measure I think is applied spiritually. I think it's a problem because I think that we've dealt with this before where like people tell us as pastors, you guys should be poor. Yeah. Which funny enough tends to be the case usually for pastors, but it's not because you should be. That's just none of us get this is like the deaf thing earlier, Pierce. Like none of the real pastors, let me qualify like that, and I'm happy to defend that statement. None of the real pastors do ministry for financial gain.
Agreed.
Bunch of hypocritical and other colorful language I'd like to say.
It's like the pastor this past week who locked the doors of the church. Did you hear about that?
I saw the video.
And he was like, we're not letting you out of here until you give $40,000. And did you see that he's now being charged with 1,500 counts of kidnapping?
That's fantastic.
Wow.
I also want to know, like, here's just from a practical perspective, you would have to plan that because it's difficult to lock the doors from the inside at most places.
Yeah.
So it's like you would have had to set something up where.
What's super funny is, like, I don't know. It's funny how how things line up. So I saw that news report yesterday and the day before, and then couldn't sleep last night. And so I had just started recently reading
MacGyver?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh.
And the pastor of the little black church in To Kill a Mockingbird locks the doors.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Until everybody needs to give one more dime to help this lady out. And he's not letting them out until everybody gives one more dime. And so I thought, well, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if the guy's like, well, it worked in To Kill a Mockingbird, you know?
So even that, like, I think it's funny that even in terms of like ministry, people have a worldly view of success.
They do.
I mean, we launched at our new building.
Yeah.
This last Sunday.
Yeah. A couple days ago.
And it was, you guys were wrong.
Yeah, we're wrong.
When we guessed that the number of people that were going to be there, I was technically wrong as well. I said what, like 530 something?
No, you said more than that.
Okay, whatever
I
said.
So
I was wrong though, because it was more than what I thought. But like, I'm sure
we had 510 chairs. Pierce said 501, I think, something like that.
You said like 480.
I lowballed it at 471. Mm-hmm. And then Micah was like 575. and it was a little bit more than that.
But I'm sure people look at that and go, listen, it was an amazing morning. It was exciting that many people came. I mean, parking's going to be
It was super cool to have everybody under one roof.
Yes, especially singing together like that.
Awesome.
Man, so cool. But I'm sure there were probably people who were like, wow, you guys are successful as a church. And that's not our measure, right? This is
never has been.
It's a bigger building.
Yeah.
It's not different than it's not different than when we had 10 people. The measure of success for a church isn't how many people that come. And we've pointed this out. Like at some point, if that's your measure, you have to admit that guys like Joel Osteen are the most successful pastors in the world. And nobody that really loves Jesus is going to admit that. I just lost a bunch of people on that one. Well, I think that's the problem, to your point a second ago, is that we have one perspective of the measure of success. And listen, we strive to be successful as pastors, but not a metric that says how many people come, but a metric that says how well are we shepherding the people that God has gifted us with.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I agree with you. I would tweak it slightly and say we strive to be faithful.
Yeah, that's fair.
And to us, and this is what we'll get to in a few minutes in the podcast, but to us, faithfulness to Christ is our measure of success. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I just felt like we needed to define the term up front.
I like that.
And so when, the 456 is 15 and a half years old. When we were about 5 years old, I was on the road coming back from an event, and a buddy of mine called me, and he, at that point, had gone to a church planting church to be trained on how to plant churches. And it was a 1-year program, and at the end of that 1-year program, the church helps you plant your church. And so he was in the process of doing that. He was in that part of it. And he said, he called me and he goes, how old are you guys now? I said, we're almost 5 years. And he goes, how many people do you run? I said, we run 40 people. And he goes, you and Micah are doing something wrong. He goes, y'all should be way bigger than that by now. Y'all are doing something wrong. He goes, that's what I like about the program I'm in. They know how to really train people to plant churches. He goes, they don't fly by the seat of their pants like you guys do. They actually know what they're doing. and it just ticked me off. Mm. So he finished the program and he planted a church, and it lasted, I think, for a year. And our attitude was, we don't care if we have, to your point, Michael, we don't care if we have 10 or if we have 30 or if we have 600. We're going to be faithful to proclaim Jesus. That's it. And our measure of success, Micah, you said it a year and a half ago when we started the building stuff. You said, because somebody had asked you, well, what if you build the building and you guys drop back down to less than 100 people? You said, well, we'll keep preaching Jesus. Mm-hmm. For us, the measure of our success isn't the building. It's not even the number of bodies in the seats. But that sounded morbid. It's not the live breathing bodies in the seats. But here, we want people to know Christ. We want people to find the freedom that they have in Christ, freedom from sin, freedom from the law, freedom from oppression of the law, freedom to enjoy and worship a good Savior, a good King, a good God. And we're kind of like, if more people come, we'll keep teaching them that.
Yes, I think that's our perspective of it's not a success thing, but like we're happy to. I feel like some of the things that we've talked about in this podcast, and then the things that Ryan, mostly you, are teaching at church, these are life-changing thoughts for a lot of people. We continually get people tell us like, man, this has been a life-change perspective for me.
Yeah.
And we want to be a catalyst for that perspective change in as many people as we can.
Yeah.
And if that means that we have a venue like this new building that is bigger than the little building we had, fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's not the measure, right? Like we're incredibly excited about this space.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
There's a lot of great opportunities with it. It's so cool too that it was like literally like the people at the 456 paid for it. Like it's
we didn't do a building program, fundraising kind of thing. We didn't ask anybody to give towards it. We didn't take out a loan from a bank.
And the amount of generosity of like, holistically the church doing that. And then on top of that, the number of people who have like put in work on the building. Even like
just the number of people who showed up Saturday before to help clean and wipe down the chairs.
And that's going to be continual. And that's what we want. We want people to feel like this is ours.
Yep.
And the building's the venue.
Yeah.
The building's not the point. It's not the purpose. The building's a venue. It's a venue for us to continue to faithfully proclaim Jesus. So for us, I think it's a great way to say it, Ryan, that for us, success is continuing to be faithful in pastoring and shepherding, not in the number of people. Listen, if we go back down to 40, we'll continue to be faithful. Yeah. If it continues to grow, which I have no idea what we're going to do if it continues to grow, but if it continues to grow, we will continue to be faithful.
Yeah.
Nothing will divert us from that.
Yeah.
And I hope people hear that too, because I know that there is a concern out there like, well, if you guys keep growing, we're going to lose that. Yeah. It's going to become like the mega church thing. Well, listen, as long as us three are here,
it won't be that.
As long as I'm alive and breathing, it doesn't matter who's on staff. Well, it will continue to be that.
That's in part why I was one of the ones helping to park cars on Sunday. Like I wanted that to be I don't want people to think, oh, we're in a new building. They're going to get too big for their britches. They're going to, you know what I mean? Like they're going to think that it's something like, we're just people who want to love Jesus and we want you to come and love Jesus with us.
It's literally just a bigger room.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people go, well, this isn't how you should do church and, you should do it in houses or whatever. I think that a lot of people probably don't know I don't know church history really well. I'm working on it. I'm reading more on church history and stuff. But one of the books that I finished at the end of last year was talking about how, yes, the early believers, we see it in the book of Acts, would go to the synagogue. That's where the scripture was being read. And then they would get up and they would proclaim like, hey, this is pointing to Jesus. And they would proclaim that to the crowds. Paul did that everywhere he went, every city he went into. That's what he did. Barnabas did that. Like these guys that were traveling with Paul, that's what they did. But what's interesting is by the end of the first century, early second century, the Christians were either taking over synagogues, like synagogues that weren't being utilized anymore, or were building essentially Christian synagogues to meet in. And so like there got a point where they couldn't fit in the living room anymore.
The house.
Yeah. And so they were meeting in public spaces like that, or bigger spaces.
Yeah. Your point is people forget that the meeting place was not the point.
It's not the point.
It was the venue. It was the catalyst. They met in houses because they could.
Yeah.
And it was easy. And then when they ran out of
able
space,
to do that,
assumedly
and then they got more people, and they're like, man, we want more people to be able to hear the gospel and the truth about Jesus.
Right.
But we don't want to talk just about like pastoral success.
No.
As a Christian, like I've talked about this before, like, oh, well, it all ties together. There was a gentleman that Michelle and I knew in Longview. He and his wife were very well off. And they were incredibly just generous. And he ran a roofing company. Like it was his and his business partner. They had started this roofing company. They primarily bid like huge jobs, like hospitals and like even military bases and different things. And they'd bid these like huge jobs, not like houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they made a ton of money. And that dude had a 9,500 square foot home that set like kind of in this little wooded area in Longview, and it was beautiful. And he had a pool with an infinity edge on it, and just his upstairs of his house was bigger than any house I've ever lived in.
Mm-hmm.
When Michelle and I were moving away from Longview back to San Angelo, we didn't have a home for 2 weeks. So we lived in their upstairs. And then that's where Asher came home to from the hospital. And after a week, we moved back out here. But they were just generous. I mean, like they gave their money and their time to everything. They served people. I remember sitting at his breakfast table in that 2 weeks we were sitting there, and he was really upset and frustrated one morning, and he's telling his wife, and he's like, man, and it was a Bible like printing resource or something where they distribute Bibles to schools or something. I don't know. And he was like kind of mad. And his wife said, well, what's wrong? And he goes, I've given these people $500,000 already this year, and they're coming to me for more. And it was like June, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, he goes, somebody else needs to get that blessing of being able to give. Like he goes, and that was just one of about 20 ministries that and this one, he had just given $500,000 to him that year, earlier that year, just, a thing you do, right? and so
y'all don't do that?
No. So the thing that was really cool about him is his perspective of his business. He was an excellent businessman. He ran his company really, really well and really, really faithfully. But his perspective was, God has allowed me to be successful in this realm so that I can be faithful over here with him and serve these people. He flew five of us to a closed country to preach pastors' retreats for 3 weeks. Flew us there. And then he came along with us. He was like, man, I've got the money. You guys have the heart to preach. I'll take you there. And then on these two islands that we went to, he rented out entire hotels. He rented out the entire hotel so that the local pastors, some of them were traveling from 12 hours away, could come to these hotels for free. And then he fed us all for a week. All of it was on his dime. And then on top of all that, this is one of my favorite stories to tell. We're about to land. We're about 40 minutes from landing in this closed country. And he comes in, he sits next to me, and he reaches into his vest and he pulls out a saran wrapped brick of $25,000. And he says, here, take this, put it in your pants. And I was like, what? And he goes, I'm a big hunter. I'm always getting stopped, at security checks and stuff. And he hands me a roll of saran wrap. And he goes, break it into smaller sections and hide it in your pants and get it through customs, because if we declare it, they'll steal it from us. And he goes, this is to give away in the churches over the next few weeks. And so I'm so stinking nervous going through the security line with 25 grand stuffed in my pants, in my underwear. And anyway, but like, that's just who he was.
Yeah.
Like every baptism service we had, we all went to a tiny church there in Longview. Every baptism service we had was at their house. Every church function was at their house or paid for by them or whatever. And he was just like, man, we're going to bless the body. He goes, I'm not a preacher. I'm not an evangelist. And he goes, but my goodness, I'm going to make sure that the people who are going to be able to do what God's called them to do. And he was just, so I go, this guy was about the gospel. And he died a few years after that of cancer that had spread. Like it started in his lymph nodes and then went to his brain, his heart, and just, it was terrible. And it had closed off his throat to the point where a few weeks before he died, he wasn't able to speak anymore. And he was sending texts to all of us pastor friends of his. And he said, don't you dare make my funeral about me. He goes, there will be people coming who do not know Christ. He goes, proclaim Jesus, lead them to the Lord, make much of Christ. And he goes, I'll be fine. He goes, I'll be standing before the King. And like, that's just how he lived.
Yeah.
That to me is success.
What's funny is it's just a perspective difference. Because I think that there will probably be people who will go, well, you're saying I can't have that kind of success until I have the money to do those kind of things. And I think it's the wrong perspective.
Absolutely.
It is.
I just think that people probably thought of him as super successful from a world standpoint.
I'm with you. Yeah. I've known some people who have that same heart. I mean, Matt Johnson and I talk about this all the time. Matt Johnson told me when he was here in San Angelo, he was like, man, I really have this heart to give towards kingdom work. And I don't think any of us knew how poor he was then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've told us. That's crazy.
Like we should have been giving him money, like taking care of him as the church.
Yeah.
We just didn't know, right?
He was Macedonia.
I should have picked up on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. I should have picked up on that and helped him more while he was here. But he had that heart before he had money.
Yep.
And then as he's had success along the way, that heart has continued. So that's different than you had an acquaintance, old friend in the past who said he was going to give you a car and other things.
Because I was traveling all over Texas and my car was a crappy car.
And he was starting to make money.
Yep.
And then he didn't really have a heart to give.
No.
Because it kept going back in other things. So he
took away the money he was giving me a few $100 a month, and he took that money away. And
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And he said, well, I've got to grow this business. And then in a year, I'll be able to give you even more.
Yeah.
And
so I think that it's all that is a perspective difference. You could say your friend Terry, who had, if you want to call it that, he had success in what the world calls success because he had a big company and he made a ton of money, right?
Yep.
But that wasn't his perspective of success. His perspective, I'm imagining him, guys like him and Matt Johnson and the people who actually have a heart for kingdom work, it wouldn't matter how much money they had.
Right.
They would still have the same perspective.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm not just talking about giving. I'm talking about like a perspective of success in general. Like even things like
the gospel is the thing that mattered to them.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where we should go as believers and how we think about success, because then it applies to everything I do. So people will say, like, how do you measure whether you're successful as a parent? Yeah. Well, it can't be about how well your kids do in school, or how well they do in sports, or how well they do like in their careers. No. It has to be about how their perspective is according to Jesus. Like, do your kids have a perspective that they want their life to be glorifying to Jesus? Because if that's their perspective, you've succeeded as a parent, right? Regardless of what your kids end up doing, right? You've succeeded as a parent, because now whether they have this phenomenal career or they have something that you would consider as not phenomenal, whether they do well in life or maybe they have struggles, if their perspective is I want to glorify Jesus in the midst of all those things, they're able to continue to come back to that perspective no matter what happens. That's success as a parent. You see what I'm saying? Like when your perspective is I want to honor Jesus in whatever I do, then you're successful in whatever you do, even if there's bumps along the way. Whether you have a lot of money, have a lot of worldly success, we'll call it, I think I'm fine calling it that. Are you guys fine calling it that? Yeah. Worldly success. Yeah. The perspective of worldly success is having a lot of stuff. Yeah. Having, or that's probably not complete. Having a lot of stuff and having a lot of influence, I think, because what you see at the most elite levels of worldly success,
being the top of your game, being the top of your field.
Billionaires aren't concerned about how much more money they make. They're concerned about the influence, right? Concerned about the power, concerned about, like, you see that all across the political spectrum of the world. So I think worldly success views it that way. And then when you have someone who says that's not actually success for me as a believer, success is to honor God in whatever I do, to glorify God in whatever I do, then it doesn't matter what the other circumstances of your life look like. You're able to still be successful in whatever you do because of that. I think that's why it's important to think of it as a perspective rather than a measure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really easy. I mean, so one of the things that my dad made really clear to me when I was growing up is that he didn't consider me a man. He didn't consider me like I wasn't tough like he and his brothers were. I wasn't. I don't know.
You didn't weigh 400 pounds with size 7 feet. Is that tough?
7.5 feet. Yeah. My dad,
it's like literally some of the smallest feet I've ever seen. A man that big. Yeah, it was like shocking. I couldn't quit looking. When I met him, I just kept looking down. Like,
for those of you listening, my dad was about 6 foot tall. When he died, he was about 350 pounds, and yes, his feet were only a 7.5.
I kept waiting for him to fall.
It's like Mr. Krabs, from SpongeBob. Yeah. He's like, tick, 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 tick. But he just let me know he was, I mean, like, I couldn't ever please him. I wasn't going to be pleasing enough to him. I wasn't manly enough to him. Like, when I was really young, anytime I cried, he made fun of me, called me crying Ryan, teased me, like, and until I just don't cry. Like, something will make me cry maybe once a year. And for me, crying is like a little bit like watery eyes, but like, he just, I wasn't tough enough for him, And so from my dad's perspective, I wasn't successful. in middle school, 7th or 8th grade, I forget. I faked after school detention 3 separate times that year to try out for track, football, and basketball, hoping that I could make a team so that my dad would like me. And it was better to tell my parents that I had after school detention than to tell them I was trying out for a sport. And then, of course, I didn't make any team. I'm a terrible athlete, but I wasn't successful. You know, I was a failure as far as he was concerned. And it's interesting because I think that there are a lot of parents today Christian parents who are missing the perspective that what you just said, that we ought to shape our kids, that success is walking faithfully with Jesus.
Yes.
Because when the job comes or doesn't come, when the money's there or it's not there, paraphrasing Paul, whether you're well fed or hungry, whether you're naked or clothed, whether you have much or little, you've walked well with Christ. You've been content because of who you are in Christ and what life with Christ is like. And if we can become those kinds of people and train our kids to become those kind of people, like, listen, this is Psalm 49, and I always think about this when we talk about monetary kind of success or success from the perspective of I don't know, just like worldly success, right? So he says, what should I fear? This is Psalm 49. What should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. No man can ransom another man or give to God the price of his life. So talking about those who heap up wealth, you can't ransom your life. You can't pay God off, right? And he says, for the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. For he sees that even the wise man dies, the fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Their graves will be their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they've called lands by their own names. Man in his arrogance will not remain. He is like a beast that perishes. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of all their boast. Like sheep they are appointed for the grave. Death will be their shepherd. And he says, so be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he carries nothing away. His glory does not follow after him. For though while he lives, he considers himself blessed. And though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, and who will never see his light again. Man in his arrogance without understanding is just like a beast that perishes. So this idea of these people who are like, man, I'm wealthy, I've got all this stuff. And it's like, dude, you don't get to take it with you. Your legacy, all the stuff that you think you're building in this world will follow you into the grave and will never see the light of day again. And people are like, no. Solomon talks about this in Ecclesiastes. He goes, what value is there in storing up all this wealth? Because when you die, it goes to whom you know not. And what are they going to be faithful with it? Or are they going to take everything you've built? And so like, to spend your life, and hear me, like, I am incredibly thankful for the people in my life who God has blessed financially and blessed with wisdom in that world, because there were years that the only reason that I was able to continue doing ministry is because those people supported me on a monthly basis. Yep. The reason we have that building that we have now is because of about 6 families, you know, and it's crazy. Like, I'm thankful for that, but none of those people, and I can picture each of their faces right now, none of those people uses that as the mark of their value.
Nope.
Not a single one of them.
No. Nope.
Yeah. And
you know what I saw yesterday, Sunday, is 2 of those families were not excited about the beauty of the building.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a subjective thing, right? They were just excited that so many people came. Like, for them, it was like, which is a correct perspective, like, they were excited that people were hearing about God. Yeah. I think the blessing of that gift for them was like seeing the ministry that's taking place, not I feel like back in the day, I'd always hear about these people who give money to churches, and they always wanted to put a plaque on, you know, I donate towards the thermostat. So we got to put their plaque on the thermostat, or they gave for the HVAC, sorry. Or like the pew, like, I understand the fundraising perspective. I think it's stupid.
Yeah.
But like, that seemed like when I was growing up, that was the whole point. I give so that everybody knows what I gave, versus like,
which is Matthew 6. They give so they can be approved by men, and there's no value in it.
Right.
There's no reward in it.
No.
Versus what? Gary, sorry.
Versus like people like some of these people, everybody I know that gave, even if it was a small amount towards the building, for them, this was ministry. Like this is the goal. The goal wasn't the building.
Nope.
The goal was the venue for the ministry that happens in the building. And I think that's a correct perspective.
Yeah.
Correct perspective.
Well, and we didn't feel like failures because we started with 11 people and then grew over the next 6 months to 17.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
I was telling years ago when we were still really small and nomadic, where we were setting up in different churches. I was preaching at a camp, and there was a retired pastor. I think he was a seminary professor at the time. Who was asking me about the church and how it was going. And I told him, and I was like, "Yeah, we kind of fluctuated. It was like I think this was when we had like 40 people. I was like, it'll be 40, and then we'll have 50 or 60, and then it'll drop down to 40. It was like back and forth. He was like, "Wait, so you guys in the last year went from 20 people to like 40 people?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Does anybody ever talk about the percentage?" He goes, "Because that's amazing."
That's 100%
growth in a year. So I loved it because he was like, change your perspective, buddy.
That was awesome.
Hey, young man, change your perspective on, don't use other people's metrics for success. And I think those were sobering reminders, at least for me, early stages, that we can't view success in those things based on how the world views success. Exactly. But I think that plays into like practically us as Christians all the time. Like, I've seen this doing financial peace, just the conversations I've had with people. There's a difference in how people view themselves based on how well they've done financially.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like how much money they make. What I mean is like how well they've done with the money they have.
Yeah.
You can just see the look of like, even the videos that we watch every week, you can see people's faces. They'll do interviews with people who've gone through financial peace program who like, you can see the intensity of how distraught they were and are about how they used to handle money.
Yeah.
And then the joy and the freedom of like, when I finally figured out like there's a better way to do this. But yeah, one of the guys even said in the video, like, man, I just felt like a failure.
Yeah.
Because of how I was handling my money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a correct perspective of success actually plays into all those things as well. Like how you handle your money is actually correct or directly tied to how you view success.
Sure.
Because just a practical example, if I think that my success is based on the kind of car I drive or the kind of house I live in, then I might put myself in a financial position that's where I need to not be.
Yeah.
So that I can look like I'm doing well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I never know. Like people I don't know, and I see them in super nice cars and nice houses, they might do really well financially, or they might be up to their eyeballs in debt. Right. I never know, right?
You don't know.
In today's society, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, Riker, my youngest, he's like, I think Dad, you can work from home as an IT guy and start off in some of these companies making $200K a year. And he's like, that'd be pretty cool. And he goes, but I also want to be a day trader. And he goes, and I think I want to play poker. He's like, and so like, I had him play poker with us recently and he did really well. And he's like, that'd be a pretty fun career. And he goes, and one day, Dad, he goes, when I have my $5 million car, and he's already got it picked out, right? He's got a specific car picked out.
McLaren?
No, it's he'd have to tell you. The dude loves cars. And he likes the art of them. He likes and I was like, dude, I couldn't fit in one of those. He goes, no, Dad, these are really made for people who are taller. Like you could fit in it. And he goes, and you'd be great. He goes, would you drive my $5 million car if I let you? Would you take it around the block? I was like, man, I'd be so nervous. He goes, Dad, if I can afford a $5 million car, he goes, I'm not buying it if that's all my money. Dad, if I can afford a $5 million car, don't worry if you put a scratch on it. He goes, it'll be okay. But he has huge ambitions. And I'm like, dude, I love it. And I was like, go for it. Honor Jesus the whole way.
Yeah.
You know, because I think there's two kind of perspectives that are wrong in this. There's probably more, but pop into my head regularly. The people who are chasing the Psalm 49 success and then it dies and it dies with them, right? Or the Christian who says, well, you can't be successful. You have to be poverty stricken. You have to have nothing. Yeah. I think that's a wrong perspective too. It's what you're saying, Micah, like the perspective has to be Christ. Whether I have little or much, my perspective is Jesus. You've said it before, Micah, and I'm sure lots of Christian leaders have said it, but I've heard it from you a lot that if you're not going to be generous when you have $100, you're not going to be generous when you have $1 million. You're just not. And so, like go and be crazy successful. Like I've told Riker, I'm like, dude, go and do that. And then take care of your mom and me when we get older, like take care of us. But
yeah, because you'll be really old by then.
I know I will be. Yeah, I'm 35 years old.
You won't be able to bend over to get into his little sports car.
Sometimes when I wake up in the morning right now, I can't bend over. It takes about 10 minutes for my joints to kind of start working. Funny. I'm walking to the bathroom and my feet hurt and my lower back hurts. I'm like, golly, did I sleep sideways last night? But it's just like, just honor Jesus, make it about Christ. And I was talking to a young man the other day who goes to school with my oldest son. And I said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he was like, man, I don't know. He goes, I think I want to be a doctor. It's like, fantastic. Honor Jesus. Mm-hmm. Go and be a doctor that honors Jesus. And what's fun is like when I begin to think through different career paths, like I have known Christians, faithful, God-honoring Christians in so many different career paths. Like I obviously can't say every career path, but like you pick the top 50 career paths, and you and I have probably known men and women in those career paths who just love Jesus. Yeah. And they were just faithful to honor Christ. And they would, like, you think of people who, they say, well, the reason that God gave us this home is so that we could open it up to people and have Bible studies here, and so that we could serve people and the minister people.
Yeah, and they designed their home that way.
With that space, that intent. Yeah. And it's just awesome, you know? And there was somebody, in our lives, Micah, who had supported our ministries for 12 years, something like that, every month. And I know that he reached out to me a couple of years ago, and he was like, man, now that the church is paying you guys, we're going to put our money some other places. And he was apologizing to me. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you supported my family for 12 years. Yeah. Mm. Like, you got us to this place. Like, and you're apologizing that you're going to help somebody. I was like, dude, no. And he was like, well, I just don't want you to feel like we're done being friends or we don't love you. And I was like, you're joking, right? Like, that has never crossed my mind ever. Like, you could have quit giving me money 10 years ago and it wouldn't have crossed my mind, because you just love Christ and you love me. Like, it wasn't about the money. Like, that got us through hard times. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the thing for me that bound me to this family, and you too, wasn't the money. It was Jesus. Yeah. And I got to do the premarital counseling for all 3 of their kids. And like, we like, it's
that,
just,
and you're right. That's what bound us to them, is that
Jesus.
Yeah. And their perspective of life in that way, like their goal was to honor, as a couple, to honor Jesus and whatever they did, which then you could see played out in how they handled their finances,
how they handled it, how they handled their home.
Yes.
The way their kids are living.
Yes.
Like the way they minister to people.
That's success in parenting.
Every single thing that they have ever done, they've done with the intent that Christ would be proclaimed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And heart of a servant. Like I remember first camp I was at, like, and maybe it's because he's a little OCD, but like every day he was rearranging or like straightening the chairs up. Like, this isn't someone who's just like, I'm going to just stand in the back and watch. This is someone who wanted to be part of the ministry. So like, it's a heart that plays out, a perspective that plays out into everything you do. Yeah. I would like to say as well, I think that I know there's probably a lot of people who think I'll be that way when I finally have some money. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think you can't tie the worldly perspective of success with this. It has to be like, if my perspective is I want to glorify Jesus, whatever I do, that, to your point earlier, Ryan, that means when I don't have anything either, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's not, I think sometimes we, even as Christians, measure it based on like how much we give, or even if it's not money, like how much I've helped, or the skill sets I've given. And I think you can't put a metric on it that's a metric that the world uses. No, it has to be like, I'm saying this over and over on purpose. If your perspective is, I want to glorify God in whatever I do, it will affect the way that you live. Yeah. And that is success. Yeah. And it might look different. I think people need to hear this. It might look different than other people. Yeah. You say this all the time. Like, I'm a difficult person for insecure people to be around, because I don't give a crap what people think about me in terms of value. And I tend to be the person who wins. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In conversations. I say that about you all the time. Well, I mean, like you've said that. Yeah. And so I think that like, I'm sure there are people who are like, well, I'm, or even you in teaching, like I'll never read the Bible as much as Ryan. I'm not successful. It's a wrong perspective. Yeah. Like, you cannot 100%. Measure yourself based on other people. It has to be, is my perspective to honor Jesus, not not gauged by how other people do, but just on that heart, and then it will play out in your life and everything that you do.
Well, and not even in terms of money, right? Like, I know we've talked a lot about money on this because that's how the world often measures success. I think Psalm 49 even kind of points that out.
There's a lot in the scriptures that talk about
it. Yeah, but like, my Tuesday morning Bible study that I lead in my living room runs between 6 and 10 people, and we love it.
What a failure, dude! It's not.
We love it. You know, my Wednesday night Bible study, we've outgrown my living room, but that's still only like 35 people out of the 600 that were at our church on Sunday.
I was gonna say you got 510 seats now. So
you know,
true.
You got room to grow.
The Friday Bible study that I'm leading was sort of invite only, but we've only got 5 in that, and we're doing some really intense stuff. And then like week before last, out of 8 days, I had 10 different counseling sessions where Michelle and I are trying to pour into marriages. Like Michelle has started doing all that with me, which is super cool. And we're trying to pour into marriages, and we're trying to pour into some people who are broken and just trying to find their way, you know? And outside looking in, like, take our building away. We've only been in that for 2 days. Take the building away and put us back in that little building, and we're doing 4 services, and people might look at us and go, well, yeah, I don't know. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade the time that I'm spending with people and Lori and Hal Reese, who have been with us for 2 years. They knew they were going to retire out here. They'd bought a piece of land out here. They were coming out here because her mom was out here, and their plan was to buy the land, fix it up, and sell it. And then they decided to retire here. Well, 6 months before they moved out here, they started following different churches from San Angelo and started listening to different sermons, found us, came to us, and they've been with us ever since. And they're like, man, we're 70 and 66 years old, and like, we're loving the Bible more than we've ever thought possible. But you know what? At their home church where they came from, they had led Bible studies for like 30 years, and they were discipling people and having people in their home. And now they're here, and they're like, man, and what did they do? They immediately got plugged in. They're serving at the coffee bar. They're like, one of the comments that we got from Keith yesterday was, in that text that he sent us, was, I love seeing this multi-generational people just working and serving and helping people out. And like we have people who just want to come and love on people. And to me, I'm like, dude, that's success. Like, I had a young man yesterday come up to me. It was the first time he's ever been to our church. He came with his girlfriend. It's not the first time she's been at our church, but she hasn't been in maybe a couple years. And so he just said, look, man, he goes, I just wanted to shake your hand. He goes, when we came in, there wasn't a seat for us. We came in late, and we were standing in the back. They were kind of in the back corner over by the coffee bar. And I was kind of walking the room, and I was telling some people, like, we're getting more chairs. And he goes, and I just felt uncomfortable. I thought people here are going to judge us. They're not going to like us. And I don't know what his background is with church or anything, right? Yeah. So maybe he's had really poor experiences. But he said, you came up to us, and you're like, man, we're so glad you guys are here. Look, we're getting some chairs over so you don't have to stand the whole time. And he goes, and I just thought, oh, okay. And he was like, he goes, and then you started preaching. I was like, all right, yeah. And he goes, so we'll see you next week, you know? And I'm like, success, like that, right? Where he will come back. He came in nervous. I don't know the background. I don't know why he came in nervous. I don't know if somebody stared him down when he came in and it was just inadvertent or whatever. I have no idea. I know he said to me, I came in nervous, and I came in like, man, I'm going into a pit of snakes. Those were his words. And he goes, and then you came over and talked to us, and I was like, yeah, cool. And for whatever reason, like a 30-second conversation. Yeah. And I'm like, success. And I have no idea if he knows Jesus or like, I just love the dude. I want to show the guy Christ, you know? And I'm so stinking excited about that. Like, I already have boys asking me from yesterday, like, hey, so can I help with the parking next week? Like, we already have dude, high school kids that are like, dude, we want to help. And because they were all like, that was really cool. Like, you know, and they saw other people out there in their vest and like, can I get a vest and help next week? And I'm like, yeah, I'll show you what we need done. So like, to me, what we're building there, I'm like,
we should find since we're going to have to move parking obviously out, we should find a used golf cart and let somebody the ones who have driver's license, give people rides from their cars to the building.
Love it. Yeah. Well, there are people in our neighborhood who have them. We just need somebody to bring it over on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll just borrow it for Sunday. Yeah, like 5 gators over there.
Yeah. But the thing about it is like success, like look, your kid being able to hit a home run out of the park. And what about this new bat that the New York Yankees have developed, right? I think it was the Yankees.
I don't know anything about it.
I saw a picture of it.
It's just been over the last week. And like an engineer who is friends with the Yankees or works for the Yankees or something designed a new baseball bat that's a torpedo bat. So it's a little fatter in the middle and then tapers. And he's like, well, this is the area that people hit the ball with most. So if you make the bat a little, just shape the bat this way, you hit more home runs. And apparently they are. So like the baseball bat hasn't been redesigned in like forever. And he's like, hey, I have an idea. But like that's awesome. That's really cool, you know. But like people have this idea, like, man, I'm going to make my kid the best athlete, and I'm going to make them so successful. And we're going to put them in every single thing. Mm-hmm. And to your point earlier, Micah, you said that people are like, when I get more money, I'll do this. When I get more money, I'll do that. People have the same mindset, not even about money. Look, when I finally get my business going the way I want to, I'll start coming back to church. When I finally get this thing taken care of, then I'll start investing my time with the church and my family in church. And I'll make God a priority. I just got to get this done first.
Yeah. You won't.
And what you're building, what you're sacrificing is true success. You're sacrificing true success in Christ and living for the glory of Jesus.
Yeah.
To build a thing that will die when you die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so build the thing, but just don't divorce it from who Christ is.
Yeah, I think the problem is the perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because you could, if your perspective is I want to glorify God with my life, you might build all those things, build the wealth with the correct perspective that this is for the kingdom. And I think included in that thought is I'm going to pass this down through my generations.
Sure.
So even my dad, I was talking to my dad yesterday at lunch, and they've been in the house they're in Highland Range since 1999.
Yeah.
We moved in right after I graduated high school. And I mean, it's a nice house. It's not giant. I think it's like 1,900 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, with like an acre. And he was telling me yesterday, he was like, man, I like am gone most of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I come home, I literally just use the bedroom and my bathroom, and I cook in the kitchen. He was like, I don't even use the other side of the house. He'll have people stay there sometimes who need a place to stay, but he was like, I don't need this. And he goes, I've been thinking about we came up with some ideas, but like basically trying to downsize, and rent this out. And his entire perspective, and he said it, he goes, because if I did it correctly, he goes, then I would have more to leave you guys, because then the house has been paid off for a while. So he's like, if I was able to rent this house out and use that money to pay for whatever I get next, now I have 2 properties without spending any extra money.
Money.
Any extra money.
Yeah.
And then you guys have more. It's a correct perspective.
Right.
Of building wealth is that it's a kingdom mindset of even like I'm passing it down. He's not thinking about him at all in that decision minus the living space. He's thinking about more for his kids and grandkids, which is, there's a proverb that talks about that.
Yeah. And it's in the Psalms as well. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, but they store up wealth for their children's children.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's wisdom to that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not the measure of success, but I think the correct perspective of I want to glorify God with my life allows you to even be successful in how you pass things on to your children's children.
Sure.
And I don't mean like everybody has a lot of money. What I mean is, what if that was simply, what if you saw a generation after generation after generation honoring Jesus with their life? You have a chance, Ryan and Pierce. I mean, your moms, both of y'all have moms that love Jesus, but like in terms of your dads, y'all both have the opportunity to start something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what if generation after generation of y'all's family honors Jesus with their life because you started that? That's success.
Oh yeah. I was talking to somebody about that the other day. That like I've enjoyed art. It's art supported me in that period of time when I wasn't traveling and preaching anymore and the church couldn't pay me, and I started doing art and it paid the bills so that we could do the 456.
Yeah.
Art was what supported me.
Yeah.
I still love it. I love to paint. So it won't ever be something that I don't do. But crap. Oh yeah. But I was saying like whatever I do with the church, whatever I do with, I want to write. There's so many things I want to write. There's stories I want to tell and books I want to create. There's a lot of stuff I want to do. what matters to me most, and the legacy that I think that we as Christians really leave behind, isn't our business, isn't our houses, isn't our land, because Psalm 49 even talks about that. You have lands that you've named after yourself, but that passes on to somebody else eventually.
Yeah.
But the legacy that I can lead, that 200 years, 300, 400 years, 1,000 years from now, if Christ waits that long, will still have an impact, is if I have shown my kids Jesus, and they have shown their kids Jesus, and they have taught their kids about Jesus, then that's value.
Yes.
That's success.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's where we can like get diverted easily.
Yeah.
Is trying to use a measure of worldly success to value ourselves. I think it's what people value themselves based on a perspective of worldly success. And I don't think
taught that from the earliest age.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm practically, right. I don't like cars like Riker does, but I also
but now that you're a Jeep guy, you're a Jeep guy.
I was gonna say, like, there's something to that, right? Like, like one of my dream cars is the old boxy Broncos. They're just so expensive now. Like that would, I mean, it's not a $5 million car, but you know, you're talking about 100,000, 75 grand plus probably to get one restored. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That perspective isn't what drives me.
Right.
It's I like real estate. I would love to I have this idea of what I want. I want property. I want it to look like this. I want my grandkids to have this place. Like I have this dream, and I'm going to push for it.
Sure.
But if I get it, that's not like, oh, I made it.
Right.
If I don't get it, I don't feel like a failure. It's just something I'm pushing for because I can. Right.
And then you've got people like Nolan who have a gorgeous property, Nolan and Tracy, and he just texted me yesterday and goes, "Hey, we got to plan our summer baptisms out there."
Yeah.
And they use this place to have our church family come out, and then they feed us all, and they just are like, "Hey, no, God gave us this place to be a blessing."
I'm not sure people catch this or even know the story, but like Nolan diverted the spring-fed little creek on his property when he bought it so that he could redo that entire area we do for baptisms.
Oh, cool.
He's not doing that so he can swim.
Yeah.
He had that in mind.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he had that in mind.
Yeah.
Right. So, because that's what it was used for originally, right?
Yeah.
Baptism. So like Nolan spent a lot of time and effort and probably a ton of money to redo this area with the heart and goal.
I want it to be used for people to be baptized.
Yes.
Yeah. People who have put their faith in Jesus.
Right. Right. So I think maybe the warning for people is stop using a metric that is of the world to value your own success, because I bet there's a lot of people who feel like a failure often because they're using that metric. And living a life for the glory of Jesus doesn't require you to do anything outside of living life for the glory of Jesus. It's not like you're working up to a place where you can finally live life for the glory of Jesus. It's a perspective shift.
Exactly.
Here's how I'm going to live, whether I have a lot or a little, whether circumstances are good or bad. It's a choice I'm making to view life from this perspective instead of trying to measure myself from a worldly perspective. And I think back to the beginning, the trap we get into is thinking somehow that perspective has to do with how well we do from a worldly perspective. Like I can do that if I can have that perspective if I'm comfortable financially.
Yeah. We feel like to have a correct perspective about Christ, we have to accomplish everything on this earth first.
Yes. Yes.
Missing the fact that you're going to be dead in 70 or 80 years and you've missed the boat.
And the reality is we're all different too. Like Cammie is not goal driven at all. Which is kind of so fantastic for me because I'm so goal driven. So she's like, she didn't go back to teaching even after Hayes is old enough that she could, because what she wanted for her, the value was she wants to have the freedom to go be part of anything that's going on in the boy's life.
Yeah.
She wants to go to all their sporting events. She wants to be able to go visit Seth whenever she wants to. Like she wants to be a mother to the kids.
Yeah, which is awesome.
In a phenomenal way. And she doesn't wake up in the morning and have this drive of like, I'm going to do these things. Like she would love to just, which is part of my goal with the land thing. She would love to sit on a wraparound porch in a house and drink coffee. And like, she would do that which is funny for me. That makes me goal driven. Now I'm like, I want to get that house. Right.
Yeah.
But so if Cammie looked at me and said, I'm going to measure my success based on how well I do with accomplishing goals, she's always going to feel like a failure because I'm probably more goal driven than most people.
Yeah. You're very driven. Yeah.
So yeah, I found out someone thought it was a bad idea that we were going to do the sound install, audio video install ourselves at the church. They were worried we were going to mess up all this expensive stuff. If I had known that beforehand, I would have put up more stuff. Yeah. Because I'm like, don't tell me I can't do it. You know, hold my beer, watch this. Like that's me though, right? So I'm so driven. Don't tell me I can't, because I will. If I'm the measure for everybody, based on personality, most people will feel like a failure.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So stop comparing yourself to other people. Yeah. Let your perspective be, I just want to glorify God with my life, and let that, well, I'll say let it. It will affect how successful you are in that. Yeah. In other areas of your life. You will do everything from that perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like we could just keep going and going.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, just like most of our episodes, this all hinges upon a perspective shift, how we view ourselves, how we view others, how we act and behave in the world. Like if whenever we judge ourselves, we judge ourselves in light of Christ and what he's accomplished. Whenever we judge our relationships, we think we have a gospel perspective. I'm not loving you from my own power, but from the power of the Spirit. It's the same thing with we talked about like billionaires and influence and stuff like that. We realize that the work that we do here and now is empowered by the Holy Spirit. So like it's not Pierce's influence, but the influence of God that he's using Pierce to do these things, or whatever it might look like. And so we are viewing ourselves, our relationships, our behavior, all these things in light of the gospel, which is never failing, which is never ending. And where there is true joy, true happiness, true success, there is all these things. And so we can rest in that. And then whatever your bank accounts or stock accounts or whatever, wherever that lies, your behavior, your actions, your mindset, your drive is all exactly the same. Whatever your personality type, you share commonality in the fact that the same Holy Spirit that dwells within Micah, who's driven, and versus Cammie, who may not be as goal driven, is exactly the same, with the same heartbeat for the gospel and the same heartbeat to glorify God. And so and
then they're both successful as they pursue Christ.
Absolutely.
Regardless of how that looks from a worldly perspective.
It looks different. Mm-hmm. It looks drastically different.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
I also think that perspective keeps you from being lazy, and that perspective keeps you from being driven in a way that's not honoring to Jesus.
That's true. Yeah. And it grounds you in the midst of that as well. Like, yeah. You're right, Ryan. We could talk about like every single facet of it in regards from a worldly perspective to a godly perspective, in regards to how it like changes us. Like even like psychologically, like from stress wise, like there's just lots of things that I think go into it. But what do you think a simpler view might be in the midst of it, the conversation, Micah?
Success as a believer is honoring God with your life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
One last thought as an example. I think this was on a podcast, but it may have been just regular conversation. But we talked about how Stephen, when he got stoned, not like high, but like when they killed him with stones. Just got to clarify.
I hate it, but I feel like you have to in the 21st century.
If you just say the sentence, Stephen got stoned, like nobody's going to nowadays immediately assume that. Yeah.
It was April, end of April. Anyways, he like that probably in the moment seemed from the outside looking in like, man, this dude is not very successful. He just got killed because he seemed like a hypocrite according to Jewish culture.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul's there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Probably had something to do with Paul's conversion. As you pointed out, whether it was on the podcast or in the conversation, Stephen's stoning is what caused the disbursement of the believers across the world. Now the gospel gets spread across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a dude who in the moment people are probably like, oh, God, it's not very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And little do they know that God's like, watch this.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to stop having the perspective that
Jesus wasn't very successful by worldly standards.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair. I mean,
3 years into ministry.
3 years in the ministry, everybody abandoned him except for a few guys, and then he got killed.
You can go on and on. Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Zero converts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, we've got to stop viewing our life from a worldly perspective, and
I just want to be more successful than Jesus. That's what people are thinking.
Yeah.
I heard a pastor a long time ago talking about something in that regard. It wasn't necessarily success, but it was along these same lines. And he was like, "Oh, you messed some stuff up. Like it doesn't look the way you thought it would look. Well, guess what? You're in good company." Like let's tell all these stories and how God still glorified Himself or twisted the circumstances or whatever. So yeah, dope. success as a believer is honoring God with your life. I love it. You know who else I love? When you go to YouTube and subscribe. Oh, did you see that change? Yeah, there you go. Go over to YouTube, subscribe to Simpler Pod. If you're not already there, if you're watching, hit that subscribe button. You control your level of notifications and stuff like that. It's not like you're going to be bombarded with stuff, but that number.
Well, yeah, you're bombarded with what? A new episode every Tuesday?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm just thinking like there's plenty of people that send out like all this stuff to subscribers and things like that.
I heard someone recently say like, oh, I don't want you guys to do a background check on me because I don't want to put my social out there. And I was like, have you ever gotten a loan?
Yeah, for real, right? Like, have you ever done anything?
A paycheck?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever gotten a paycheck?
Have you ever applied for a job?
I don't want to get paid by you guys because I don't want you to have my social security number.
I'm not saying like just go blast it, but I'm just like,
this is the system. Yeah, this is how it works. This is a number that's tied to you. If this person
lived in an off-grid cabin in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone, like I would be like, I got it. But
what would be great is if they fill out the paperwork and they just put like 1. I'm not going to give my real number. But yeah, go subscribe on YouTube. That subscriber count helps us have not only more control over the channel and customization and things like that, but also we begin to gain revenue from AdSense. So please go over there and subscribe. I think we're around like 470, 480. 471. So
what do we have to get to?
I think 1,000. So do it now. But you guys have been awesome. Those of you who have been subscribing and stuff like that since the beginning, like even though that is a big climb, like every individual counts towards it. So please go over there and do it. Even if it's not your avenue of choice to take in the podcast. We are in the Garden Audio as always. We love it that we can come out here. Today we forgot that to let Stephen know. So Micah broke into the studio so that we could record and let him know. But it's awesome that we have the ability to even break into the studio.
You're welcome.
The Garden Audio is awesome. Stephen is great. Leave a comment down below wherever you are.
Middle school for
that's right. Teaching you those things. Hey, check out the show notes. Check out where you can get plugged in, how you can know what's going on in the ministry. There's links down below to the 456's page. There's links to Simpler Bible, to Eagle's Wings, to Micah's ministry, to everything going on here. So if you are a part of the Simpler community and just the podcast or in all these different realms, we're so thankful to have you. We love you. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? We'll catch you all next week.
Nothing could be simpler.